I never imagined that one moment of weakness would shatter the very core of our life together. One careless night, I betrayed the man I once believed was my safe harbor, and now, every touch, every gentle caress is met with cold distance. I cheated and lost my husband's trust. Now he won't even let me touch him. Help. Those desperate words echo in my mind like a relentless refrain. In the sterile light of our home, I watch him recoil from my attempts at affection, each gesture a reminder that my one grave mistake has carved an unbridgeable chasm between us. I remember the night it all began, a night so ordinary at first that I could never have foreseen its disastrous consequences. It was a late autumn evening, the kind where the chill in the air mingles with the soft hum of a quiet city. I had been working late at the office, exhausted from the constant demands of a career that left me little time for reflection. My wife, Karen, had been waiting at home, her face soft with expectation. We'd built our life on routine, early morning coffees together, shared dinners, and quiet evenings on the couch. Our love, though simple, was something I believed would endure any hardship. That night, however, I made a choice that would forever haunt me. After a business dinner with colleagues that left me intoxicated by both alcohol and a false sense of invincibility, I returned home far later than usual. I know what I did next is inexcusable. I let my guard down completely. In a moment of drunken vulnerability and misguided desire, I betrayed the trust of the person I promised to love forever. I spent the night with someone I shouldn't have, and in doing so, I fractured the delicate bond between Karen and me. The next morning, I awoke with a sickening clarity. My heart pounded in my chest as the reality of my actions set in. I could feel a heavy weight of guilt pressing down on me, and I knew that nothing could ever undo what I had done. I reached for my phone to call her, to beg for forgiveness, but my trembling hands faltered. I didn't know how to face the pain I had inflicted on the one person who had always been my rock. When Karen found out, the devastation was palpable. I still remember the look in her eyes, betrayal, disbelief, and a deep-seated sorrow that cut more sharply than any physical pain I had ever known. In the quiet of our bedroom, where intimacy once bound us, she simply pulled away. At first, she didn't speak. Her silence was more damning than any words could be. Over the next few days, she avoided my touch entirely. A hand on her shoulder, a kiss on her cheek. Each attempt ended with her recoiling as if I were a stranger. The man I loved now regarded me with a mixture of pity and disgust, and I could see that every moment of physical closeness had become a battleground for the trust one had so carelessly shattered. I tried to apologize over and over again. "I'm so sorry, Karen," I pleaded during our few quiet moments when she allowed me to speak. "I made a terrible mistake. Please let me make it right." But my words fell on deaf ears. Each time I reached for her hand, she withdrew as if recoiling from a physical sting. Our once warm home was filled with an unbearable chill, and I felt isolated in a prison of my own making. Friends and family reached out with words of sympathy, but none of their reassurances could fill the void that now separated us. I felt like I was drowning in remorse, the consequences of my actions magnified by every touch that I was denied. The betrayal wasn't just mine to bear, it belonged to Karen, and with every passing day the distance between us grew more profound. I remember one particularly painful evening when I attempted to sit beside her on the couch. The television played softly in the background, but I could not focus on the screen. Instead, I was trapped in my own thoughts, replaying that fateful night and every moment of our happier times. Karen's back was turned to me, her eyes fixed on nothing, as if she had built a wall that no apology could breach. I reached out hesitantly to touch her arm, a desperate attempt to reconnect. But she flinched as if I had burned her, and in that instant, I felt a crushing realization. I had lost her trust completely. Days turned into weeks, and our home became a silent witness to my daily struggle. I spent long hours reflecting on the nature of trust, love, and the fragility of our human connections. I began to see that what I had taken for granted was a delicate balance, one that required constant care and honest communication. My betrayal was not just a momentary lapse. It was a fracture in that balance that would take years to mend, if it could ever be repaired at all. I sought solace in solitude and in the pages of my journal. Late at night, with only the dim glow of a bedside lamp for company, I poured out my regrets and my pain. I wrote about the moment I had realized the depth of my mistake, the look in Karen's eyes when she discovered the truth, and the crushing sense of isolation that followed. Each word on the page was an admission of guilt, a testament to the irreversible damage I had done. I questioned whether I would ever be able to earn back her trust, or if the wound was too deep to heal. In those moments of introspection, I began to understand that my actions were the catalyst for a much larger reckoning, one that forced me to confront my own shortcomings, my insecurities, and the ways in which I had taken our shared life for granted. I realized that I had been living in a state of complacency, believing that our routine and stability were enough, without ever considering that true intimacy requires constant nurturing and vulnerability. My failure to communicate, to address the small issues before they festered, had led to a betrayal that was as inevitable as it was devastating. The world outside continued its indifferent rhythm while I was locked in a battle with my own conscience. I tried to attend social gatherings, to engage with friends, but I was haunted by the memory of Karen's cold rejection. Every touch felt like a reminder of my failure. Every kind word from others was tainted by the knowledge that I had once lost the person I loved most. I felt trapped in a cycle of self-recrimination, unable to escape the relentless echo of my mistake. I reached out to a therapist, desperate for guidance on how to navigate the labyrinth of guilt and regret. In our sessions, I began to unravel the tangled emotions that had consumed me. I learned that the journey to redemption would not be a quick fix. It would be a long, arduous path marked by setbacks and moments of painful clarity. My therapist helped me see that while I could never undo the past, I could take responsibility for my actions and work toward a future where trust might one day be rebuilt. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I had to accept that forgiveness, both from Karen and from myself, would be a gradual process if it were possible at all. As I sat there in the quiet solitude of my apartment, reflecting on all that had happened, I realized that I was at a crossroads. I could continue to wallow in self-pity, letting the weight of my betrayal crush me, or I could choose to fight for redemption, to rebuild the parts of myself that had been lost in that moment of weakness. I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, and that there were no guarantees that Karen would ever let me back into her life. Even a single touch might remain forever forbidden. But I also knew that if I was to find any hope, I had to start by confronting the truth of my actions and accepting the consequences. That realization marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter defined by the slow, painful journey toward healing. I resolved to work every day to become a better person, to learn from my mistakes, and to earn back, if not my wife's full trust, then at least some semblance of self-respect. I began by setting small, achievable goals for myself, waking up each day with a commitment to honesty, reaching out to those I had hurt, and seeking ways to understand the deeper roots of my behavior. Though the road was uncertain, I clung to a fragile hope that one day maybe the wounds would begin to close. I knew that the public humiliation of my mistake and the resulting isolation had changed me irreversibly. And while Karen's rejection of any physical touch was a constant reminder of my failure, it also became the impetus for a journey of introspection and transformation, a journey that, despite its bitter beginnings, might one day lead to redemption. As I write these words now, my heart remains heavy with regret, yet there is a small spark of determination that refuses to be extinguished. I am beginning to understand that healing is not a linear process. It is a mosaic of small victories, quiet breakthroughs, and the relentless pursuit of becoming someone worthy of love, even if that love must be rebuilt from the shattered pieces of my past. I still have a long way to go, and every day brings new challenges. But I am committed to this path, to transforming my pain into a source of strength, and to one day facing the world with a heart that is not defined by my mistakes, but by the courage to overcome them. Every morning now, as I wake to the soft gray light and the quiet thrum of our once shared home, I'm reminded that healing is both a painful and precious journey. I still feel the sting of that fateful moment, the echo of my betrayal, the cold distance in his eyes when he wouldn't let me touch him. But in that same silence, I hear a tiny, stubborn heartbeat of hope that whispers, "There's a way back." Each new day becomes a challenge to rebuild what was broken, to earn trust from the ashes of my mistakes, and to discover if love can indeed find its way home. I remember the aftermath of that harrowing day with painful clarity. In the weeks following my confession and the irreversible breach of trust, our home transformed into a cold battleground. Every touch I attempted was met with his icy withdrawal, every attempt at reconciliation rebuffed by a silence that said more than words ever could. I wandered through our house as if it were a museum of memories, each room echoing with happier times that now seemed like a cruel mirage. I felt a crushing loneliness and a desperate need to undo the damage, yet I knew deep down that trust, once shattered, cannot be restored with simple apologies or fleeting gestures. In the depths of my despair, I reached out for help. I sought therapy, not only for my own tangled emotions but also in the hope of finding a path toward reconciliation with my husband, David. In the gentle, safe space of my therapist's office, I began to confront the myriad emotions swirling within me: guilt, regret, sorrow, and a lingering hope for redemption. I learned that my infidelity wasn't the sole reason for our collapse. Rather, it was the culmination of unspoken resentments and unmet needs that had long been festering beneath the surface of our marriage. I realized that while I had made an unforgivable mistake, I was also responsible for ignoring the subtle signs of emotional disconnection that had grown between us. The therapy sessions were brutal, at times forcing me to confront the dark corners of my own heart. Yet with every tear shed and every painful revelation, I slowly began to understand that healing would require honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to accept the consequences of my actions. At home, David and I started attending marriage counseling. Our first sessions were excruciating, filled with stilted silences, angry outbursts, and moments when neither of us could look at the other without the ghosts of our past staring back. David, hurt beyond measure, would freeze whenever I tried to reach for his hand. I could see the raw, unhealed wound in his eyes, a wound that told the story of betrayal and a trust that had been so completely fractured. Yet, amid the bitterness, there were flickers of hope. In one session, after an agonizing hour of silence, David finally spoke softly, "I miss us. I miss how we used to be before all of this." His voice, though laden with pain, held a vulnerability that I hadn't heard in months. In that moment, I knew that if we were to have any chance at redemption, we had to start by facing the truth, however painful it might be. Outside the counseling sessions, I began to change. I took up daily walks to clear my mind. Each step through the crisp morning air became a meditation on loss and renewal. I started journaling again, not just as an outlet for my grief, but as a record of the gradual transformation I was undergoing. I wrote about the moments when I longed for David's embrace and the painful irony of how my careless actions had made every physical contact a battlefield. I penned apologies that I knew could never fully repair the damage, but which allowed me to express my remorse and to promise myself that I would do everything in my power to rebuild the trust one had shattered. One particular evening, after a long day of counseling and soul-searching, David and I found ourselves alone in our living room. A room that, once filled with warmth and laughter, now carried a heavy stillness. The television was off, and the only light came from a solitary lamp in the corner. I hesitated before speaking, afraid that every word might reopen old wounds. Finally I said, "I know I can't take back what I did, and I know that I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But every day I'm trying to be a better person. For you, for us." David looked at me, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I miss you," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I miss the way you used to laugh and the way we used to dream together. But I don't know if I can ever trust you again." His words, honest and heart-wrenching, were a turning point for me. I realized that the journey toward healing wouldn't be measured in grand declarations or immediate reconciliations. It would be a slow, painstaking process of rebuilding our connection, brick by brick. In the months that followed, we began to forge a new routine, one that acknowledged the pain of our past while also celebrating the possibility of a better future. David and I set aside time each week for us time, where we would simply sit together without distractions, talk about our feelings, and try to reconnect on even the smallest levels. We took walks together, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes speaking of our day-to-day struggles. Slowly, the initial bitterness began to soften. I learned to be patient with his wounds, understanding that true healing cannot be rushed. David, in turn, started to open up a little more each day, sharing his fears and his hopes in a way that allowed us to see each other more clearly than ever before. There were setbacks, of course. There were days when a stray comment or an unguarded gesture would send David recoiling, as if the memory of my betrayal was still a physical pain he couldn't bear. I would watch him, heart aching, and remind myself that every step forward was a victory, even if progress was measured in moments. I began to celebrate the small wins. The first time he allowed a gentle touch, the second time we sat together and held hands, the quiet conversations where we both admitted that the past still hurt but that we were willing to try for the sake of what we once had. As I continued to work on myself, attending therapy, journaling, practicing mindfulness, I started to see changes not only in my behavior but also in how David responded to me. His defenses, once impenetrable, began to show cracks of vulnerability. I remember one chilly evening when we sat on our back porch watching the sunset. For the first time in months, David turned to me, his eyes soft and reflective, and said, "I'm scared. I'm scared of being hurt again, but I'm also scared of losing you forever." That admission, raw and unfiltered, was a balm to my aching heart. It signaled that beneath the layers of pain and mistrust, there still flickered a shared desire to rebuild, to try once more to forge a connection that could withstand our mistakes. Our progress wasn't linear. There were moments when the past would surge up like an unwelcome tide, when a harsh word or a cold glance would remind us of the betrayal that had once torn us apart. Yet, with each challenge we learned to communicate more openly, to express our fears and needs without judgment. We discovered that forgiveness is not a destination, but a continuous process, a series of small, courageous steps taken every day, even when the wounds are still fresh. Work and personal growth became intertwined in my journey. As I strived to rebuild my professional identity, I also focused on nurturing my inner self. I reconnected with old hobbies that once brought me joy, reading, playing the guitar, and even cooking elaborate meals as a way to soothe my soul. These small acts of self-care became rituals that reminded me that I was still worthy of love and respect, even if the road to redemption was long and uncertain. I also began to share my story more openly. I started writing a blog about my journey through betrayal, shame, and the slow path to healing. The process of writing, of putting my raw emotions into words, was incredibly cathartic. To my surprise, my blog resonated with many people, strangers who had experienced their own heartbreak and found solace in the honest portrayal of my struggles. The outpouring of support, the messages of empathy and encouragement from readers, helped me see that I wasn't alone in my pain. In sharing my vulnerability, I discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. A strength born from the realization that even our darkest moments can light the way for others. One day, several months into our healing process, David and I sat together in the living room, a room that had once been a silent witness to our unraveling but now buzzed with the tentative energy of renewal. Over cups of tea and quiet conversation, we acknowledged that while the past would always be a part of us, it didn't have to dictate our future. David reached out, hesitating for a moment, then placed his hand in mine. The simple, tentative touch sent a jolt of hope through me, a sign that the chasm between us was slowly narrowing. We didn't have all the answers, and we both knew that our journey would be filled with setbacks and painful reminders of our failures. But in that moment we made a silent pact to rebuild our bond with honesty, patience, and the understanding that trust is something earned over time. Now, as I sit in the quiet evening light, reflecting on the long, arduous road that has brought us to this fragile juncture, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. I have learned that the pain of betrayal can serve as a catalyst for growth, that even when we're at our lowest, there is the possibility of rising again. I have come to understand that redemption is not about erasing the past, it's about integrating it into a broader narrative of resilience, forgiveness, and love. The scars I carry are not signs of weakness, but of survival, each one a testament to the strength it takes to face our deepest wounds and to work every day to mend them. I know that the future remains uncertain. There will be days when old hurts resurface, when the memory of that fateful night when I lost David's trust feels overwhelming. Yet I also know that every day is a new opportunity, a chance to choose love over anger, forgiveness over bitterness, and to build a future that honors both our past and our hopes for tomorrow. As we continue our journey together, I am committed to living with authenticity, to sharing my vulnerability, and to nurturing the slow, steady growth of our renewed connection. I have learned that true intimacy is built on trust, honest communication, and the courage to confront our imperfections, and I hold on to that belief as I look forward to the future. In the end, my story is not one of simple forgiveness or a return to what once was. It is a story of transformation, a journey through pain and regret toward a place where hope and resilience flourish. I may have lost my husband's trust in one reckless, hurtful moment, and I may still struggle with the repercussions of that betrayal every day. But I have also discovered that even the deepest wounds can eventually heal, and that with patience, empathy, and hard-won determination, love can find a way to bloom anew in the most unexpected places. I close my journal tonight with a quiet certainty. My journey toward redemption continues, step by step, touch by tentative touch. I will carry the lessons of the past with me as I strive to build a life where forgiveness and healing are not distant ideals but living, breathing realities. And while I may never fully erase the memory of that night, I choose to believe that every scar tells a story of survival, growth, and the unyielding power of the human spirit.